So we're really thrilled to be here to talk to you about how to get better at making better products. This is actually based on a book that just launched last week, and we're still riding the high of that book launch, and we will tell you more about that later. But over the next 40 to 45 minutes, we're going to show you what it means to think about building products differently. And then we've got time at the end for questions. So keep those questions coming. We'll keep an eye on the chat. So let's start by looking at a couple of customer reviews. Like, these are pretty amazing, right? Imagine kind of getting these. It's the best company I've ever seen. We'll never have a home without one. Thank you for making this so simple. And these are reviews that all of us would love. So let's take a minute and introduce you to the products behind these testimonials. Heather, what's this first one?
Yeah, this first one, and we love talking about products that are taking the world by storm, and Wise is a perfect example. Recently, 15 million in Series A funding last year. They are a home security or smart home device company. And for those of you that actually use Ring, which I do, and I've been pretty frustrated now seeing Wise and the love that their customers have for it, chops my hide a little bit. But it's a $20 fantastic, simple to use camera, and they're expanding into all smart home devices. But you can see here how much their customers love them. I love this Wise camera. This is the 6th one I have purchased. That's huge, huge.
That's huge. So here's the second one. This is one that we'll never have a home without one, and it's called Ecobee. And they are a smart thermostat device. They're a Canadian company, and actually Amazon invested about 35 million in them a few years ago. And last year, they were the brand of the year in Canada, and they're going to hit about $1 billion in sales this year. So incredible growth. And this is why it happens, right? When people absolutely love this thermostat, and when you hear the word love in any customer review, it makes people buy a lot of products.
USAA is no different. For those of you who have been in the military or have inherited memberships in USAA, as I have, you know what I'm talking about. This is the best financial services company I've ever worked with. I've been with them for 20 years, but these testimonials tell you everything about this company. I've never had a problem in an insurance claim or a banking issue. They are there, and they're backing you up. It's another great example of a customer or of a product that is solely focused on their customers, their members.
And I got to tell you, I'm so jealous every time I hear Heather talk about the banking experience. I kind of hate Bank of America just a little bit more. So maybe some of you are with me. So we just introduced you to 3 products, and there are 3 numbers underneath these products. So anyone want to put it in chat what they think these numbers might be? Like, anyone got a clue? I know there's a bunch of product people out there. So
we got some answers. We got some answers.
Yeah, there we go. So these, it's Net Promoter Score. For those of you who are maybe not familiar with it, it's a metric that a lot of product companies use that measures customer loyalty. And I got to tell you that these scores are outstanding. World class is about 60. So when you start seeing things like 80, 71, 78, it means the companies are doing something pretty incredibly right. These products are absolutely loved by their customers.
Yeah, that's right, Vidya. And, I think NPS can be debatable to many companies or to many folks, but these scores say that they are doing something extraordinary. And we just talked about 3 B2C companies, right? Those were very consumer oriented. But it does happen in business. We often get complaints, I guess is a tough word, but often questioning whether or not you can actually achieve high net promoter score within the B2B environment. It's possible. Gusto is a great example. 200 million Series D financing last year, growing significantly, over 100,000 customers in payroll. They are a small business payroll solution, a SaaS product. And these are just a few of the testimonials, rivaling the likes of QuickBooks now, but very focused on customer experience.
Okay, so there's a B2C example in there. So you can't tell us that we're just focusing on B2C. And these companies make it look easy, but the reality is it's hard work. And I think we all know this, right? From working on products. And in fact, there's a ton of really bad products out there. So getting these types of NPS scores, not easy. And so there's, what we want to do is to tell you that you're not alone. Like even the best companies in the world struggle with making great products. And for that, we're just going to pick on some really well-known companies. And we're going to start with our friend at Google. And this is Google Glass, right? So anyone remember this? Because I was, talked into buying one for my team. And so there were rave reviews. Everyone wanted one. There was a ton of fanfare. It promised to do so much. And so we bought it. And at that time, I was working for an auto insurance company. And so we were making software. We thought this could do some pretty miraculous things. And I got to tell you, sort of 3-6 months in, we had no idea how to use this. And by the way, nobody else did either. It was a total epic failure.
New Coke, enough said. Don't even need to go into that detail.
Okay, here's one that's close to home. Vista. I still feel pain, right? My sort of like my stomach still shrinks when I see Vista. Couldn't install it fast enough.
This one makes me laugh, actually. So everyone in the audience, picture sort of the rugged, rough and tumble Harley Davidson rider, right? Stereotypical, right? Not everyone is like that, but stereotypical Harley Davidson rider. Now picture this commercial. You have this model, this handsome model with his shirt off and his glowing hair, waving in the wind, riding the Harley Davidson motorcycle without a helmet, and with some French narrator through the commercial that says, legendary, a Harley Davidson eau de parfum. You can only imagine what all of these Harley Davidson people were thinking, going, who the heck created this? And needless to say, it bombed big time. They pulled it off the shelf within months.
Kind of want one.
Yeah, right. The other one is for many folks out in the audience, I've been in health tech for quite some time. And, EMRs, tough. They struggle with customer delight for providers, and which then impacts the healthcare overall for patients. So I would say epic failure early on. I think they're getting better now, but EMRs are a perfect example of where, they tried to solve for a regulatory requirement, but missed completely on customer experience.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. We've seen the biggest companies in the world. They can also fail miserably at making products. So you can have unlimited resources, you can have a lot of money, you can have talent, and it can still lead to product failure. We all want to make products that customers love, that they write reviews about, that they rave, that get those beautiful NPS scores. We want to build products that customers actually want. So how do we get to a place to do that? So a little bit about us. Heather and I met 10 years ago, back in 2004, where we spent 10 years together at Intuit, leading TurboTax and QuickBooks product development. Products that enjoy really great NPS scores and customers love. We then went on to lead products at various different companies, including consumer products, platforms, healthcare, gaming, and both in B2B and B2C. And then 4 years ago, we got together and we crafted a product foundation based on all this experience that we knew could accelerate any team's product development. We knew we could help teams get better at making better products. And so we used this combination, this foundation, in coaching over 100 companies from startups all the way to Fortune 50. And so we've tested the formula and it works. This year is when we put it together in this book called Groundwork. And so this is what this talk is based on. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell you why Groundwork is so important. And then we're going to go into the 3 pillars that make up Groundwork. And then finally, we're going to touch upon how you can introduce it into your teams. So let's start. Let's get started by actually just setting the stage and talk about how these great products with these great NPS scores, how do they get to this degree of customer loyalty? And how do we compare it to other companies that we've seen that get this so beautifully right? And for that, we wanted you to think about 3 different reasons they all have in common. The first is that all of these companies got super clear on the problem that they want to solve. Think about the Gusto team that Heather just talked about, the payroll software. It was founded with a mission for making it easier for small and medium-sized businesses to manage their payroll. You know, getting paid is pretty critical, right, to small businesses. And these small businesses were just not served by those big payroll providers out there. So Gusto specifically focused on this particular customer, this particular business, making it more accessible and more meaningful for them. And I want to just share one example. This is a feature that is essentially, I've only ever seen it in this particular, in Gusto. And what they do is they have the ability for the business owner to write a small personalized note with every paycheck that goes out. Now, that's kind of insane for any decent sized company, big sized company. But for a small business, that was a delighter. They loved it. It made it feel close to their employees, and their employees loved it. So there's just one example of being really clear, building features, understanding that problem. The second is that all these customers knew their customers, all these companies, sorry, knew their customers inside and out. Okay, so for this, let's go back and think about Ecobee, that smart thermostat, where they actually started, right? And remember, this is a company that's hitting some pretty significant strides right now. But their first customer segment, their early adopter, was someone who loved smartphones. They loved data. They were geeks. They wanted to have people who played with their devices. And so they really understood this particular focused customer inside and out. They had understanding, they had empathy. And these companies, all of them knew their customers so well, it's kind of like they just had lunch with them. That's the level of intimacy with their customers. And the third is that they connected the customer need to the problem. Now, for this, I just want to talk about Wise for a second, right? This is the security camera, the one that Heather actually wants and wants to ditch her Ring. So for that, like, think about sort of the problem that lots and lots of people have with security cameras. Like, there's lots of different types of customers here, and they all have quite different needs, whether you're a big homeowner or a smaller department dweller, or someone who, you know, maybe is renting a home. They thought about all of these types of problems, and we're going to tell you a little bit later how they connected the need to the specific problem of wanting to feel more secure. So these are the 3 core aspects that every single company got it right.
That's right, Vidya. And that really those are really the pillars that we're going to be talking about. But what happens? What's the implication of not actually setting that groundwork? Well, the first is really, you can't really say no to anything. If you don't know the problem, or don't have a consistent definition of the problem that you're solving, or know who you're solving that problem for, you really can't say no. You can't justify saying no. And what happens is your priority list grows, because since you can't say no, you got to throw it back into your priority list, your roadmap, your backlog. That list of priorities continues to grow. You know what else happens is, when you don't really have a clear or consistent definition of your problem, or who you're solving it for, or the needs related to those problems, then you get in this cycle of opinion-based decision-making. When opinion-based decision-making takes over, then anything goes, right? You may find that you make a decision based on opinion, and then a week later, or 30 minutes after that meeting, somebody with a different opinion can infuse their opinion into that decision, and that decision becomes overturned, or it's reopened. That's really painful. And both Vidya and I have seen that over and over again, for ourselves and for the teams that we help. And this is really painful, because what then the output of all of these challenges for us is, we start to build everything. We build everything for everyone, and we don't solve any one customer segment very well. And you end up with lukewarm results. So lower net promoter scores, lower SAT scores, or just lukewarm reviews. And that's not what we want.
Okay, so go ahead, Heather.
Sorry.
You're going to jump in.
I'd love to jump into this little Slido tool. I want to hear how many of you experienced some of these pains over the last 30 days. Just click on the ones that you feel that you've experienced just in the last 30 days.
Got some debate is the first one. Yep.
Great.
Interesting.
Yeah, the overturned decisions is, I mean, we see that so much. And confused teams, right? What are we solving for? Who are we solving for? It's frustrating for dev teams. If you're a product manager, we know there's quite a few product managers in here. You know, without having real clarity on that problem or the person we're solving that problem for, you got some confusion on those teams. Yeah. Yeah, we've all experienced this pain, all of us.
Yeah. Unfortunately, every single one of those, we can check the box on every single one of these. But it looks like debates is winning. Debates full of opinions and versus facts. Yeah. It's maybe especially now, kind of given that it's a little, you know, sometimes the customer research is I'm hearing is a little more challenging.
A little bit
kind
tougher.
of back to the opinion. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, super interesting. Thank you for sharing those. We love data. This is awesome. There'll be more opportunities to jump in. So, and this continues to be open. So if you haven't had a chance, keep going. So what we really want to do is we want you to get better at making better products, right? So how do we do that? This is where we're going to start with the 3 groundwork pillars: the convergent problem statement, an actionable persona, and individualized needs. Now, for you, some of you, especially product people, some of these terms might look a little familiar, and that was very deliberate on our part. We wanted to use terms that felt familiar, that you could immediately start working with. And what to remember though is the way that we've put these together is unique. So keep an open mind, think about them a little bit differently. Even if you're like, I know what that means, just keep listening, right? Because we have a very unique spin on how they connect. Now, I'm going to take you through the convergent problem statement first. Heather's going to cover actionable persona, and then we're going to tag team the last one. So let's start with convergent problem statement. Now, I bet everyone in this room loves solving problems, right? It's pretty natural. It's kind of like why we're, you know, a lot of us are in technology. It's a really fun space to be in. And it's way more fun to be thinking about like working on features. And the time often going from when you hear a problem to going straight to like, I know how to solve this is nanoseconds. But, you know, where we want you to go to is we want to pull you right back to what the customer challenge is and the set of problems that are associated with this challenge. You know, when we were back at Intuit, we spent a lot of time thinking about how to pull back into the space. We used to call this go broad in order to go narrow. Now, if you're a product manager, you might have heard the space referred to as a problem space versus the solution space. If you're a designer or you follow design thinking, it's often referred to as convergent and divergent thinking. But honestly, it doesn't matter what this means. What we care about, what we want to focus is resisting the temptation to jump straight into solutions. And this is hard. We are fighting our natural problem solving instincts here. To get to a convergent problem statement, you need to consider all the different types of problems. You need to ask why a lot. You need to talk to customers. And only after you consider this problem broadly, then you can narrow in or converge in order to get to that single critical problem statement. And this is how we define it, right? A convergent problem statement expresses the difficulty a customer is dealing with, stated with no attempt to address possible solutions. And that's key. Okay, so we talked to you about why. I want to go jump into like an example to really bring this to life. And let's go back to our home thermostat problem. This picture here looks a lot like the one that I have at home. there's a bunch of numbers. There's a bunch of different sort of features on here. I have to tell you, I don't know what half of those mean. I actually have two, right? I have one upstairs and downstairs. So goodness knows I don't use them properly at all. And let's say we're a team and we want to redesign this antiquated home thermostat. So maybe the way that we describe this could be something like this. There are really no home temperature systems that are easy to use. They don't have any simple bold numbers. It's really difficult to discern them. And we want to allow the user to control their temperature and the humidity via their smartphone. Now, what we've done here is we've described like what we think based on the problem that we've seen, and we've got some features. So we could go ahead and design a product with this. And that one company did exactly that. They came out with this solution. Now, on the face of it, it looks pretty fine, right? It's simple. There's not that many numbers. It looks pretty easy to read. It's got some nice colors. It looks very straightforward, and you can use it through your smartphone. So the company that designed this launched it out into the world. And anyone want to hazard a guess to what the customer reviews might have been? Using this as an example on purpose. Read these. I love the idea, but it almost resets itself and changes the temperature. This thing has ended up costing me money due to a poorly designed program. Nothing worse than waking up in the middle of the night in a sweat because it's 87 degrees in the house. Oh boy, right?
These are not the reviews. Mine.
Oh, have I got a product for you?
Yeah.
These are just awful, and they're just nothing like the reviews that we started with. And it's because they went through and they designed features. So now we want to say, let's just take a giant step back and let's actually think about some of the actual problems that customers might have had. And for this, we want you to imagine that we went out and we actually talked to people, right? We actually went out and we visited homes, we talked to homeowners, and we found out what kind of problems they really dealt with. So here are a few. Maybe the display is unreadable, or different settings were needed for different days of the week. I have an odd schedule. I'm spending way too much money on energy, or the defaults are insane. And as we, again, talk to customers, let's assume that a theme kept coming up, that we started to hear this resonating amongst more and more people. And what we ended up doing is to find a problem statement that we converged on. We narrowed in to something that felt like it was common, it was core, it was a root cause to many of the other things that were happening. And once we got to this convergent problem statement, let's rewrite it. Let's rewrite it in a way that we can actually talk about this as a problem. Homeowners have multiple cold and hot zones in their house. They find it annoying and confusing figuring out how to set temperatures and zones automatically. So they constantly change the thermostat manually. And I got to tell you, this resonates with me. I have like a bathroom in my house that is literally like the Arctic, in the winter, and it becomes a sauna in the summer. So this is a clear problem statement. And one of the things that we want you to point your attention to is that we've described a very specific problem, right? What we've also done
without a feature,
with
right,
no
Vidya? Because
features,
you talked about the last problem statement, and it was all about already presuming the features as opposed to what the problem was.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a very specific problem, but we also brought that the emotion, right? The frustration, the annoyance, the confusion that comes up because of this problem. And we understand the root cause, right? We understand what people are doing. They're constantly doing something manually because of this issue. And as Heather just pointed out, we don't talk about features here. We don't talk about solutions. All we've done is describe the specific problem. So now let's go back to our friends here. And so this is what they designed. They designed a system that, again, you can see it looks beautiful. It has the bold numbers, it's got the smartphone, but here's a really interesting thing. Understanding what it took and what the actual root cause was, they also shipped it with these tiny little sensors that you place in different parts of your home. And so now it's not just a home thermostat, it actually reads the temperature in the living room where I sit and ignores the temperature in the hall where the thermostat is. What they've done is they've solved the problem. They are no longer hotspots in the house. Does that make sense? It's like a specific problem that allowed them to go through and solve the actual problem that customers had. Now as we lift up, we love this quote. This from Theodore Levitt. This is back in the 60s as a professor that he said this. People don't want a 1/4 inch drill, they want a 1/4 inch hole. So it's 2020, and we're going to take it a step further, and we're going to ask you to think about, like, what do they want to use the 1/4 inch hole to do? What is the actual problem that they're going after? And I can tell you that we go into this particular example using 1/4 inch drills and 1/4 inch holes in our book. And yes, that is a shameless plug. So if you want to learn more about that, get the book. But this is really fun. So here's the thing. Do you understand what problem your customer is trying to solve versus thinking about features, thinking about solutions? Are you always focused on that problem? And so for this, I want to go back to our friends at Slido, and I want to ask you, think about the priorities that you're working on. Think about your backlogs, think about your feature set, think about your roadmap. And so how many of these priorities actually have a clear problem statement that goes with them? So please get your phones out again. Good.
Don't be shy.
Oh,
It's anonymous.
Nice. Okay, so it's looking like we're sort of like looking between some and few. A couple of you lucky people like had most.
I think the point too, what Vidya and I see a lot of is, yeah, we understand the problem, but one little a tip I would give to every team out there today: when you go to work tomorrow, ask the question in your next product decision making. Ask everyone in the room to write down the problem that we're solving with this feature decision or this product decision, and then read it out loud and see if everyone is consistent. I'm going to guarantee you there's going to be some nuances and differences that lead to different directions. It's a very interesting exercise that Vidya and I take to every one of our teams.
Yeah, we often start our coaching that way. We start with everyone on the team talking about it. And I can tell you, in the 100+ companies that we've worked with, all the way up from, like I told you, up to Fortune 50, we've never once had an entire team write down the problem the same way. So that tells you something. Well, good. Thanks for playing along. Let's move to the second pillar.
That's right. So pillar number 2, we just talked about what's the problem we're solving. Now we need to talk about who we are solving that problem for. So we do that through personas. Okay, take a deep breath. Everyone glazes over when we talk personas. Personas have gotten a bad rap, and here's why. Let's take you through a couple personas that we've actually encountered. So the first one, let's talk about Brent. Brent, CEO, 33 years in the industry, age 54, 14 events attended. I focus on what will drive improvements and profits in my company. Did that tell us anything about Brent? I can guarantee you, if Brent is a CEO of a startup, he's going to have a very different set of challenges than the CEO of a Fortune 500. So if I'm thinking about trying to solve one of his problems, I'm going to need to know a little bit more. So I give this one an F. Sorry. Let's hope that the next one is even better. Helena, head of human relations or HR, married, 3 kids, 10 years at the company. Okay, cool. Skews female. What the heck does that mean? She's 30 to 45.
I don't think we should go into
suburban.
HR territory.
Yeah, right. Like, okay, and then she's suburban. Okay, so is that okay? If we were into politics, maybe that would help us, right? Maybe. And calm demeanor. What the heck does calm demeanor mean? okay, I'm going to slap some Zen colors in my UI, and then I'm going to pipe in some spa music. I give it a D. We're going a little bit more into who Helena is, but not really actionable. The worst part of this type of persona, it results in a company solving for everyone, not really solving for particular personas, so to speak, or segments in their marketplace. They're solved for everybody. And that usually ends up meaning that you have the words comprehensive in your product description and a lot of lukewarm users because we've overburdened them with a ton of features and a ton of complexity. So what do? We have to make our personas actionable. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. The intent of a persona is really to help you build direction and make product decisions with confidence. Actionable persona here, a living archetype. It's still an archetype of a segment of your customer base. It represents a base of customers with similar behaviors and characteristics that is actively used in your day-to-day product decisions. That's the key here. It's actively used. They're not sitting on some shelf collecting dust. They're not only used by design, they are actionable that you can bring into product decisions every day. So I'm going to go into a deeper dive on this, like Vidya did with Ecobee. I'm going to go into Gusto. Let's pretend for a moment that we are the product team and we have our first persona, the actual person that writes the payroll checks or processes the payroll for the company. Again, small business, the person's running payroll. Female, age 34 to 50, married, 2 kids, employed, full-time, blah, 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 blah. Does that tell you anything? Is that helpful? Let's say we're trying to build an onboarding experience for Gusto for this person. Did anything I just talked about actually help guide your decisions? No. We need to know more. We need to know, what does she care about? How does she make decisions? What keeps her up at night? You need to know more about who she is and how she operates, and something else beyond what we normally call psychographics. And this is a nuance that Vidya and I have introduced in the book. It's called character trait spectrums. Fancy words of something that you all have thought about in your day-to-day jobs as product teams. For example, tech savvy versus tech phobic. This is a spectrum that we often talk about designing software, right? Is our customer base tech savvy or are they tech phobic? And that helps guide how we think about designing an experience, right? We might get away with a little bit more complexity as a way to introduce additional features for our segment if they're more tech savvy versus those folks that are a lot more tech phobic. We might need a lot more hand holding. So you think differently about how to design a product in that way. Let's go back to Gusto and the person that runs payroll. A couple trait spectrums that matter to us, right, in designing a payroll product. Is she more controlling or is she more a delegating type, right? On the spectrum, if we know that she's more of a delegating type, as we think about the onboarding experience, we might have something in the setup that says, send an email to all of the employees to set up their own profiles, right? Just delegate it to the employees so that I don't have to do it, right? That might be one way that this trait spectrum helps you make a decision. Another trait spectrum might be how focused she is on accuracy versus efficiency. We might have to make some trade-offs as a QuickBooks a leader in QuickBooks, as well as TurboTax. We often had to make decisions about how much time and energy do we spend on making it clear how a number is calculated so people understand the accuracy. So opening up the black box is kind of how we termed it, versus making that task 20 seconds. We might add a couple seconds to that task so that they feel comfortable about the accuracy if that's where they land in the spectrum, right? So these types of spectrums, these character trait spectrums that we talked about, fancy words for just understanding where users sit on particular spectrums that matter most to the industry that you're in. Let's go back to onboarding experience and go deeper in on the payroll person, right? The person that's running the payroll. Let's introduce Jennifer. So Jennifer has some behaviors, some attitudes. Let's just take the first couple. If it's not accurate, doesn't go out. I check everyone's work. Okay, I'm getting a sense that she might be a little bit more focused on accuracy. I don't necessarily know if she's more controlling or delegating, but certainly more about the accuracy. And I know what I'm doing. Just let me get started. So if I think about that onboarding experience, I'm starting to get a sense for, I might want to do less handholding and get her right into her first payroll run, right? Next factor that we have to think about, which is very common in B2B, is I have to think about the buyer persona as well. In this case, the buyer and the payroll user, they actually interact quite a bit. It's a small business, right? The buyer here is the owner, and the person running the payroll is helping the buyer make decisions. Even the first attitude we see here, I need to be up to date on the numbers to know if we're going to meet our commitments every month. That might dictate something in the onboarding experience that sets up some sort of snapshot that Jennifer wants to send to Carol every payroll run so they know how much cash they have left in the bank account. So you can see how personas, to be actionable, need to really focus on the real person, real emotions, and real attitudes, and less about demographics. This is about the real person and finding out where they lie on particularly important spectrums that help you decide how to make decisions. But the focus of an actionable persona allow you to make decisions quickly and with a lot more confidence. That's the focus of an actionable persona. And we help you in figuring out how to do that through Groundwork.
Not exactly stock photos either. These women look like they're working, Heather.
That's right. That's actually a funny thing. A lot of personas that we see, they're stock photography with somebody smiling and posing for the camera with perfect hair and perfect outfit. When in reality, when you're doing B2B, you often find you're dealing with folks that are tight schedules, lots of priorities, and you want to make them real to your dev teams so that they can feel that visceral connection to them. So another Slido, you can tell we love Slido. Fun little tool. We'd love to hear from you. Are your personas actionable? Do you feel like they're actionable in the definition that we've just talked about? Yay. All right. That first person, I think, they're like right on.
Yeah, they're in good shape. Stay at that company.
Yeah. What we usually find when we enter into new companies is that they either have personas, but they're sitting on a shelf collecting dust, or they just don't have personas because the company really thinks that they're solving for so many personas and the market that they have a good handle on it, and they have too many priorities. That's what we usually find.
I want to tell you too that for the people who've like what persona and nope, it's really simple to do it. You don't need a ton of money. You don't need to go hire an agency. You can do this yourself. It's really simple. We've got some specific steps on how you can do one within a week and make it actionable, which is really the whole point of this, or less. Yeah, we've done them in like days, right? Like, you need to talk to some customers, so you're not going to get away from that, but you can do this so quickly that it's painful that when we see those nopes and what persona, I'm like, oh, it hurts.
That's right.
All right, let's keep going. So the third pillar is individualized needs. Okay, so let's talk about this. And we covered, problem and persona. And if we have a clear idea, in the ideal world, there's a clear problem, there's a clear person, But that's not our reality. The reality is that you've got marketing teams, right? You've got account managers, you've got salespeople. So you've got a ton of people that you're trying to solve for. And no one's ever been in an ideal situation with just one. So when you have limited resources, you have to so carefully choose what you work on and who you're going to focus on. And that's what we want to talk to you about, individualizing people's needs so that you can make trade-off decisions and you can focus those limited resources and efforts that you make very specifically and in a very targeted fashion. So here's our definition. Individualized needs mean aspects of the problem for a particular persona that your solution must address. And so just a couple of things that the needs might be about. It might be specifically about an inefficiency in a task for an individual. It could be an environment, like the context in which that person is either working or living or doing what they need to do. It could simply be a baseline expectation that you have to get up to even be considered as a player in the market. So let's actually take you through our last example, which is going back to our Wise camera.
Yeah,
and
let me add one comment. Let me just add one thought right there,
Yeah.
Vidya. Sorry to interrupt. So on that
Yeah, go
definition
ahead.
of needs, notice how there is no mention of features. These are really going back to something similar to what Vidya talked about earlier in our talk, which is it's understanding the problem without any sort of idea of what the solution might be. That's what needs are as well. It's understanding the context of that user and pain that they're experiencing within the problem. Sorry, go ahead.
Cool. No, great ad. So let's talk about these home security cameras. So tons of people have got homes, tons of people rent. Like Heather, shouldn't every single person want one of these?
Of course, everyone should want one of these, but not everyone has the similar needs, and you might not design the solution. You might not design Wise the same way if you're solving for one over the other. Let's just meet a few personas, right? Let's jump into the shoes of being a product team for Wise. So let's meet Jane. She's a nurse, just moved into an apartment, lives alone. Let's meet Peter. He lives in suburbia, has a young family, travels quite a bit for biz. And then finally, let's meet Angie. She's a student, lives with 3 roommates in a rundown part of the city. Now, knowing these 3, you couldn't possibly know whether or not the same Wise camera is going to solve for all 3 of these folks very well. And most companies we find presume that they can solve for everybody with one single solution. That doesn't mean you can't, but it means that you've got to first understand each of your personas in depth, or you end up solving for what we call bloatware. Too many features to try to solve for way too many people at the same time. This is a picture of Vista. When is Vista? Vidya already talked about that earlier, right? Really painful when you install it. Broke everything when you install it. But what she didn't mention is they also got a lot of flack for bloatware. PC Mag was recommending to shut off 12 features the second you installed the application because they were superfluous and actually created more confusion than necessary. That's not a good position to be in, right? And so what we need to do is we need to go deeper. We need to understand each persona at a level of depth in understanding what their needs are specifically and how they prioritize those needs, right? Some needs might span across multiple segments, but they might be very different in terms of importance depending on that persona. And so what we call this is individualizing needs by persona. And how do we do it? We do our homework. We do observational research. In this case, we go into the environment of our users or our prospects, and we understand where their problem is. We understand that environment. We understand the pain that they experience with the problem. How do you think Intuit actually became a market leader in most of the markets they entered, right? We did a lot of these, what we called follow me homes. We'd go into the houses of taxpayers. We'd watch them from start to finish in filing their taxes. And if they didn't finish in one session, we'd come back to watch the second session. We'd see the pain. We'd understand where the receipts were located, how hard it was to find a particular tax form that they needed to enter into the system. It's that observation and understanding the pain that brings the empathy. And that's the second piece of this, which is really empathizing with each of these personas and understanding the needs at a level by which you can understand the level of pain and how you would prioritize those needs according to what you're seeing. And doing that, by doing that, you're individualizing needs by persona, which is critical in being able to decide between what features to launch first, second, and third. So let's come back to Wise and look at some examples of, and go deeper really with the personas we talked about earlier, right? So for Jane, I work odd hours. I often come back late at night. I'm forgetful. I sometimes leave doors unlocked. I like technology. I'm always buying the latest gadgets. Okay, great. There's Jane. Peter, travel a lot, worry about my family. Kids, leaving doors open. If I can lock up from the road, that would be helpful. I can install and fix anything. So some similarities here already, right? You're seeing some similarities. Angie, my neighbor's apartment just got robbed. I can't afford a security system. I'm on a budget. I wish I could see my pets when I'm at school. So if you kind of take a step here, and not possible to solve necessarily for every single persona here. First, you need to understand how to prioritize that.
So let's take on what Heather just talked about, and let's just characterize those needs. We just shortened them as need 1, 2, 3 for Jane, and then we've outlined them for Peter and Angie. And in fact, this is the way a lot of teams that we've seen work, right? You take a look at need number 3. It feels like it's common across all 3. So maybe we should just go ahead and do that one first. And then looking across these different needs, we see Jane and Angie have 2. So there's another commonality. So we can kind of kill 2 birds there. And so maybe we do need 1 first. And then maybe your boss is like, okay, this is what we have to do next. This is what we need to do for our investors or for our shareholders. And hopefully none of you are laughing about that, because it's a sad truth that often priorities are handed down to you. So here's the thing. Please don't do this. Please don't go through and see commonality and build your backlog or your list that way. You know, we know it happens a lot, but what this results in is it doesn't really solve the needs for any of them. So imagine that we launch with need 3 and need 1. Well, you're going to have Jane and Peter and Angie show up, and they're not really going to recognize their product. They're not going to see that it meets and checks off all those pain points that they have. What we really want you to do is to make a conscious trade-off. We want you to take a look across the different personas, and we want you to make a choice. Now, in this case, this is an example. Peter, remember, Heather talked about him owning a home, he's traveling. And it feels to us like, from a market perspective, Peter's going to be buying several cameras. He's not like a one and done. So he represents potentially a higher lifetime value. We have a really clear idea of his needs. And so we're going to focus with Peter. Now that's not to say that we're ignoring Jane or Angie. They're our customer segments. We are going to get to them. And in fact, looking at this, we're like, okay, it actually meets Angie's immediate first need as well. So what might we do next? It might be that we push to 6 and 7 in order to make Angie the next target before we continue to build a second version or a V2 for Peter. These are all conscious trade-offs. We prioritize. We've thought about individual needs, and now we can talk about the reason that we're building our backlog in a specific way based on what we know about the person that we're building it for. This is what individualized needs is all about. You pick the problem, you pick the persona, and then you prioritize needs against this, and then you rinse and repeat all day long, because you've got a set, you've got your groundwork in order to go build the solution per persona, per problem. Make sense?
That's right.
Heather, bring us home.
Yeah. Thanks, Vidya. So yes, so this is groundwork. Vidya just talked about. Groundwork really is the three big pillars. I mean, we talked about those primarily tonight, right? Building the right problem statement, developing actionable personas so that you can make some trade-offs, and then individualizing the needs per persona allows you to understand what you're going to be trading off in particular market segments. So you're making conscious decisions between features based on the needs that you know that these personas have. So you've established sort of what you need for groundwork. In our book, we actually go deeper than that. We talk about some of the practices that enable you to establish this groundwork and iterate over and over. We're always learning. We're launching the product. We're learning more about usage. We're learning more about what's working and what's not working. And so we talk a lot about three big practices that are invaluable in being able to establish and evolve or iterate on these three pillars. One is developing a hypothesis, using it as a rudder for all of your research, and being able to do it well so that you get the answers you need to make product decisions. The second is really conducting scrappy research. We talk all about techniques and ways to build a practice that has your entire team doing scrappy research on an ongoing basis. So you're constantly infusing customer learning on an ongoing basis without dragging the organization through trying to get statistically valid sample sizes. Really helpful when you're trying to iterate quickly. And then finally, we talk a lot about getting commitment. In product organizations and as product management folks, we are constantly challenged with trying to influence multiple functions in the organization. And it's really hard to get commitment across multiple organizations, multiple opinions, like we talked about earlier. So we go into a lot of detail in driving for commitment. So that is Groundwork, the book. Our whole mission in life is to help people get better, help all product teams get better at making better products. That's our goal in life.
It certainly is. And so we promised you we'd tell you about the book. You can find out all about it at productgroundwork.com. So please go and take a look. And if you've got any questions, you want to get hold of us, you think about something later, grab a picture of this and write to us at info@productrebels.com. And so the slide that we want to share before we open it up for questions is that we've put all of this together in a hands-on workshop. You know, we mentioned right in the beginning that Heather and I are product coaches. And so we've distilled this into a very experiential learning type of experience. It's limited to 12 people. It's a public workshop and we have it once a month. So we've announced the January, February and March dates. They are on that site. So again, you've got your camera still out from doing all those cute Slido polls. So grab a picture of the bit.ly link for Groundwork Public. And the week represents 90 minutes, Monday through Friday. And we work on your product. You bring problems in and you will end up with actionable personas. You'll end up with individualized needs. You'll have a clear statement of a problem. You'll know how to do those practices and you'll actually work on them, talking to customers. It's a really fun, very interactive experience. And for Claude, because he speaks so highly, he loves this community, and now so do we. We want to give you a significant discount if you'd like to join one of those public workshops. So we hope to get to know you and get to meet you early next year. So with that, and I'm going to say, I kind of cheated. I said questions, but we want you to stay and just do one last poll. We love feedback. You know how important NPS. It will take a second to do this poll. I will leave it up and then let's see what questions are out there. Like, I'm going to pull the chat up and please tell us. Oh, I'm looking at Raymond. I would have clicked negative customer feedback, but my one customer did. Oh, that's sad. I'm sorry, Raymond. That's we'll feel for you. Come to the workshop and we'll tell you how to get more customers. A lot of the time, B2B clients, we've had so many instances where they've never talked to a single customer. You know, we've had issues where they have to go through sales or through account management, that they work with a dev team, but they actually don't communicate. And every single time we found ways to get them to talk to customers, even if it's proxies, we will figure out a way for you to get out of your desk, out of your head, and talk to real people. Questions?
Or comments? Anyone have any experiences that they want to share? Although I think this is webinar, right? So we're not allowed to speak up, but if you want to share a thought.
You can't allow people to talk if they raise their hand. If they have the ability to raise their hand, we can enable that if needed. But we have a question that came in. If you could please share the discount code again.
Absolutely. It's Tech Cover. I'm going to pull it back up again so you can grab the picture right there. I'll leave that up now because I think the Slido is there. So and we've got a couple of questions.
Yep. How do you decide? Yeah. How do you decide how many personas you need and how many you need to talk to? Great question. So it depends, which I hate that answer, but for smaller startups, startups, we try to slim down your personas into minimal, right? You want to start with one user, one buyer, which for B2B, you usually have two personas. For B2C, you usually start with one, and then you get some product market fit, some traction, and then you expand from there. But if we think about TurboTax, a well-seasoned product, they had well over 20 million customers at the time, years ago. We had 7 different personas, but 7 different products. So you want to be pretty focused on what features, functionality, and how you design a product really fits your persona really well. And you're going to make some hard decisions on whether or not you're going to add it to one product or you're going to create a new SKU or experience for those personas. So I tend to recommend less is more. And if you have to solve for 5 or 6 personas, which in B2B, you often have multiple users or permissible users on SaaS products, for instance, you're actually creating a module or an experience for each of your users. They're not overlapping a ton. So I try to be very focused, and less is more. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and let me jump into the second part, which is how many do you need to talk to? And so, there's a lot of good research on this, and it's not very many. In fact, if you've targeted your persona carefully, right? So you've gone through, you've thought about the psychographics, you've got a really clear understanding of what this person cares about, what's really important to them. And Heather talked about practices. Part of our practice is how do you define this? What kind of questions are the most important? And I'll give you one tip. You want to go ask questions that you really don't know the answer to. So build out a set of questions, and then it's about 5 to 7. That's it. You tend to get pretty quickly, after 3 to 4 conversations, you tend to get some pretty good answers. You get some good indication of whether the hypothesis that you have, that you are testing and talking to customers, is actually true or not. So one of the things that we do is we teach you how to put together a hypothesis to test a persona. And then you'll go out and talk to 5 to 7 customers, and either you'll come back and you'll say, wait a second, I actually learned something, and this might actually be 2 different types of personas, 2 different segments, or your hypothesis is validated and you get a strong persona that you can then start using to make decisions with. You've turned it into an actionable persona. So 5 to 7, it tends to be the answer, as long as you have a strong hypothesis to start with. Okay, next question. For B2B,
next.
Yeah, go.
For B2B, do you often find a large difference between buyer personas and those who use the product or service? So both Vidya and I have very different experiences in B2B. So I think both of us can answer how we see it. I see B2B and user personas is very different than buyers. And that's probably because of the companies. So healthcare or health tech in mostly SaaS, I'll usually see very different buyer versus user. Now, when you get into small business, so I was in QuickBooks for many years, and I started QuickBooks Enterprise, which is sort of medium-sized businesses. Those sort of converge. The buyer and the user often were the same person. And so that's why for small business, sometimes it's harder. You have to really understand the differences between the buyer and the user and understand whether or not they're the same person. For QuickBooks, many times, more often than not, it was the same person. But for larger companies where you're getting into different permissions and roles, I see them as very different.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add there is the larger differences that I've seen is in B2B, there's often a decision maker, and which is differentiated from the actual buyer. So think about procurement, right? And so you've got like someone who's the actual end out buyer who's got all these decision criteria. So when you're starting to build out that persona, they're worried about finances, they're worried about security, they're worried about all these things that they have to do as a checklist. The decision maker is thinking more strategically. And so you're starting to think about like, what do they care about? How do they want their product positioned? What's important strategically? What are the business priorities? So now you're asking things like, is it a finance metric? It is a customer retention metric. What does the business care about? And then your hands-on user, who's often can be an influence, sometimes unfortunately is not an influence. You have to care about what they're doing in terms of not wanting to ignore them. You want them to be happy, satisfied users, so the feedback loop is significant. So that tends to be the most that I've seen is, and I try as much as possible with B2B, is to narrow it down to 3. And so not to try and get all these nuances of all the people in the decision chain, but pull it into like your core decision, your core buyer, and then your core user. Hopefully that was helpful, Justin and Armando. What other questions are there? We love answering questions. This is kind of like where we light up. It's real.
All right, we have a few questions that have come in the Q&A section. And so this was from Martin. You mentioned user and buyer as key personas. Are there any other key stakeholders that should be considered? Stakeholder roles that should be considered?
Yeah, I think Vidya just explained one additional one, decision maker versus actual person that writes the check. I think that's a really good add. Those are the 3 that I think about quite often. I don't know if there's additional beyond that.
Yeah, and I think, in some of the, Heather talked about healthcare. You can often find there's a physician, there's a medical director, there's nuances. And what you need to do is you need to sort of think about in your journey of the product and who's using it, who's touching it, who's making decisions, who needs to connect with it, who needs to integrate with it. It can get very, very complicated, and it can be very, very sort of a large number. Try and narrow it down. Try and really set yourself some very high bars about how critical this person is in order to either make the decision or to use. And so we understand there's a ton of complexity. 3 to 5 would be the highest level of complexity we would choose to come into any company. We've never allowed a company that we've coached go more than 5 personas, because usually we can, very quickly articulate why certain ones are more important than others. So if you're dealing with more than 3 to 5, go back and take a look and really question whether it's critical or not. What else is out there, Claude? I don't think we can see those questions.
No problem. So the next we have Marcelo ask, how do you make sure the person you're talking to is really representative of a big enough market?
Yeah,
a great
that's
question.
a great, yeah. A couple of things come to mind, and I think we'll come at it in a couple of different ways. So it's a really good question, because this whole willingness to pay is the key, right? It's what we're trying to get Groundwork to do. So you can have a great problem, you can have a great person, and you can have specific needs, but you have to put it in the context of the market. Is it a big enough problem? Is there enough willingness to pay? Is the pain big enough? And so you can do groundwork and identify whether this is true by understanding who this person is. And it allows you to understand how big the actual funnel for your business could be. A lot of the time, the reason why we see businesses and companies and product teams try to go after everyone, sort of that like whitewash across personas that Heather talked about, is they want to try and make up this like really big market. What we want to do, especially for startups, is to understand like your runway, to understand how big your product could eventually be, so you can build out different segments and different personas to make it look like a much bigger market, to identify how you're going to grow into that market. But the way that you start is to get really clear on a big pain that someone is willing to pay to make go away. And that's really important, because you can have problems that people, it's not a big enough issue that people aren't willing to pull out their wallet. So when you identify that problem and you identify that person, we talked a lot about the problem space. When you start moving into the solution space based on what you have, then you can start playing with pricing. You can start playing with concepts. You can start playing with like, what is it going to look like? And what are those levels? What is the price level? What is this, a SaaS model? What's the recurring? Who else might need it? But no matter how far you build out your roadmap, you build out the vision of the product, pulling it down to a key person that's willing to pull out their wallet and pay for it is key. What else would you add, Heather?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And we talk a lot about that in the book. The one thing I'd add is figuring out how to understand your total available market, right? We've been talking a lot about psychographics, willingness to pay, but it's tough to then go and quantify that and say, oh, this market is 5 million strong, right? And so it's not easy. The way that we have done it in the past is triangulating based off of either substitute usage, right? So substitute product usage, and trying to use proxies for the problem out in the marketplace, right? And this is where demographics might be able to help a little bit in sizing. So you find the problem space, you say there's 10 million people with this problem. The people that you know are going to open their wallet are within this sort of segment. And that is X% of this market of people who experience this problem that are willing to open their wallet. So it's kind of it's a little bit of an art to it in identifying and trying to extrapolate what you're learning through these interviews and psychographics and open, willingness to pay. And it's a little bit of an art to then extrapolate that back to how big that market is. And there's ways to do it, but you're sort of piecemealing that through how big is, how many people have this problem, how many people are using substitute products that might give me another proxy. So the bottom line is it's tough to do, but it is possible. It just takes a little bit of Sherlock Holmes, unfortunately.
All right. Nice answers. All right, we have another question come in. What are the key elements of the problem statement that need to be there to ensure you're stating it right?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to the website, productgroundwork.com, and you can actually download all the templates. So we have a very specific template for problem statement. We also have a template for persona. It's a one-pager. Everything we do is super simple. It is designed to be done in hours, whether that is putting together templates or research. You know, we're not, as you probably gathered, like hugely theoretical. We're very pragmatic, very practical. And so download the templates, because there is a format, is a very specifically designed. We want you to answer specific questions. We want you to dig into the emotion. We want you to dig into the root cause. We want you to talk about, you know, the problem in very key ways. So the best thing to do is just go to, I'll go back to this slide, go to productgroundwork.com. You'll see templates. All you need is your email, and you can download all our templates. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And then send us a question. If you've got one, we're happy to answer them.